Welcome to the Muscles and Veggies Fitness Podcast. This is where you get nutrition, health, fitness, performance, all perfectly packaged together in a bite-sized podcast to help educate and motivate you to stay on your fitness journey. Today, we're talking about a show that's called Carbs Are Not the Enemy, but Sugar Is. All right. This stems from a conversation that I had with a client this morning. And in this conversation, he asked me about an individual in his family who had been doing the carnivore diet. Said he had lost like 25 pounds. He's been doing this like 3 weeks, looks better, feels better. And he wanted to know my thoughts. Like, is this sustainable long term? Is this something he can continue to do? Are carbs really, is like a no carb, no sugar approach really the answer to fat loss? So I thought, well, I gave him my answer and I thought, this would be a good topic for a weekly coaching session. So that's what today's session is all about. We're going to talk about the carbs are not the enemy and sugar is. And if you remember, I did a show a while back, and I'm sorry I don't have the number, but it was the good carbs versus bad carbs show. And we're going to kind of meld both of these shows together. And so before I dive into this, first I want to tell you guys, thank you for using the Thorn discount and all you guys who support the show by taking advantage of the 25% off that I give to all my listeners, to all my clients that off of the Thorn.com supplements. If you guys don't know what Thorn.com is, Thorn is the best supplements in the market. The NBA basketball teams use Thorn, the USA Olympic teams, the Mayo Clinic has made Thorn their go-to supplement store. So listen, I mean, Thorn is, you get what you pay for. They are high-quality supplements, and they are third-party tested and verified to have in them what they say they have in them. So what are my go-tos with Thorn? 5 things. Number 1 is the whey isolate, vanilla whey isolate. They make a chocolate too, but the vanilla is my favorite because I pair it with blueberries and the collagen, which is number 2. It's called the Collagen Plus. It's collagen and NAD together. So I do those two with blueberries and water and a scoop of peanut butter or almond butter, and it's a delightful morning smoothie that I just really look forward to have when I shoot out the door in the morning. The third thing is magnesium. You can either do a magnesium citrate or the magnesium biglycinate. I like the glycinate before bed. It's fast acting to relax you before bed and prevents against leg cramps, muscle cramps, any of that kind of stuff. Best magnesium that I have found for relaxing before bed. Number 4, I put the creatine in my shakes. So if you guys don't know the benefits of creatine, it's literally one of the most validated, scientifically validated supplements ever. Creatine is good for mental health. Creatine is good for physical health, muscle performance, you name it. And it's cheap. It's like $15 for a 90-day supply. So I advocate everybody figure out a way to get creatine supplemented into their regime. And then lastly, number 5, I haven't talked about this on the show, but liver cleanse. It's Thorn Liver Cleanse. It's a combination of Similarin, which is milk thistle, and berberine. And berberine regulates your blood sugar. Milk thistle is a liver detoxifier. So listen, we are bombarded by all types of stuff, including high carbohydrate stuff that's all around us, which berberine helps lower blood sugar. But then also we're surrounded by environmental toxins and chemicals. We cannot help but breathe stuff, smell stuff, ingest stuff, wear stuff, you name it. We are taking in toxins all the time, and that milk thistle is really important to detoxify the liver. So those are my go-to 5. I literally have them on subscribe and save, and I take advantage of an extra discount on top of the 25%. Doing that subscribe and save for the whey, the collagen, the magnesium, the creatine, and the liver cleanse. You get 25% off the entire store. All you got to do is go to the description, email me, say I would like the invite, whatever you put on there. I won't send you any other emails, I promise. No marketing whatsoever. I will literally just send you an invite from Thorn.com to join my client dispensary. That's how you support this show and take advantage of the discounts that I offer. And it also helps me to keep doing these weekly coaching sessions with you guys. So let's dive into the topic. Carbs are not the enemy, but sugar is. Let's start out by saying this. This is what I told my client. Anytime that we jump to extremes, the success rate or long-term success drops way off really, really fast. So in other words, your long-term ability to sustainably continue this diet, this extreme, is very, very low. And literally only a handful of people out of 100 will continue this type of approach for a long period of time. So they get immediate success, but oftentimes what they'll do is end up yo-yoing back. And this happens for a number of reasons. We're going to talk about some of those reasons as we go along here. But honestly, the biggest thing is just burnout from variety. And this happened to me. I was really into the ketogenic diet back in 2018, 2017. And I did it solidly for 2 years. So my success rate was pretty good, but my health fell apart doing it. And I know a lot of naysayers will be like, well, that's because you didn't do keto right. Well, let me tell you, I did a really anti-inflammatory keto nose to tail approach, lots of veggies. I tested my blood glucose, I tested my ketones, and let me tell you, we're going to go through some of these reasons, but my health really, really suffered for it. And the body is not stupid. It knows that you need other nutrients. And so when you limit yourself to steaks, ground beef, pork, chicken, fish, eggs, and bacon, and I know that's not everybody's approach on the carnivore diet, but it's a lot. And your body's going to scream out for other nutrients that you're not getting. And so it's going to send you cravings, and those cravings are going to lead you to get off of that carnivore approach. And oftentimes what ends up happening is people end up binging. And so that's not healthy either, because then you're rocketing back to the opposite extreme where it's like, oh, well, now that I've had some carbs, now I'm going to have cheesecake and this and that and the other. And it piles back in and you feel miserable. Often leads to immediate weight gain as well. So is low carb the answer to losing weight? Yeah, it is. I really, truly think it is. But that doesn't mean it's no carb, okay? It does not mean that it's no carb. So let me go through some of the reasons why this is important. And backing up just a second, just 4 or 5 shows back, if you look, I did an entire show on macros and micros. So in other words, macronutrients and micronutrients. Go back and listen to that show if you haven't heard it already, because the micronutrients is what I'm talking about. If you're lacking in some of those based on your nutritional approach, your body will continue craving and sending you signals that it's not full yet. So oftentimes what I see as a coach, and I've experienced it myself, is if I'm lacking micronutrients, even though I've had a full plate of food and I should be full, my body is still crying out for whatever this nutrient it's lacking, and it makes me want to overeat. And so this is why we often term obesity with they're overfed, but they're undernourished. And they keep wondering, why am I eating so much? Well, part of that could be addiction and emotional issues, but part of that could be a lack in a specific nutrient that they're needing. So this is an important topic to talk about, and that's our number one that I'm going to talk about. Is the mainstay of our micronutrients come from colorful carbs. They are the most micronutrient rich foods on the planet. Yes, meat has a lot of nutrients in it, especially organ meats. And that's why if you're going to do a carnivore diet and you're gung-ho on that, you have to incorporate liver and kidneys and all these other things that come nose to tail, because it's going to give you a broad range of nutrients that you won't just get from eating ribeye steaks and the muscle meat, okay? The second reason is that carbs suppress cortisol, and no carbs equals high cortisol. There's many studies that have validated this. So carbohydrates do a really good job of suppressing stress hormone in us. And a 2022 meta-analysis, this was published in the National Institute of Health, and a meta-analysis, for those of you who don't know, is where they take a broad look at lots of different studies, right? So in this particular one, they looked at 27 different studies for low carbohydrate diets. Notice what they found, that low carbohydrate versus higher carbohydrate moderately raised cortisol compared to a high carb diet at rest. Even worse though was after exercise or activity, cortisol was much higher in much more higher in the low carbohydrate group. So in other words, after they exercised or they were very active, their cortisol was elevated much higher than those individuals who were on a higher carbohydrate diet. And this makes sense. Back when I used to coach CrossFit, and I would see the people that were like the most depleted, wrecked individuals were trying to do CrossFit at the same time as they were doing low carbohydrate diet. And I saw a lot of men have to get on HRT or testosterone replacement because their cortisol was so high. And guess what the study found? It said along with these findings, they said that cortisol was responsible for a large decrease in resting total testosterone. Okay, so high carb equals lower cortisol and higher sex hormones. And that doesn't mean high carb, like 350 grams of carbohydrate a day. That just means a healthy dose of carbohydrates keeps your sex hormones in check. Whereas the low carb group that was very active, they had higher cortisol and then a decrease in sex hormones. So I don't care if you're a man or a woman, hear what this is trying to say. If you eat low, like no carb or very low carb, even ketogenic, and you're not crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's, you could be killing your sex hormones. And I've seen this happen a lot and to a lot of people. And it happened with me. I'll give you an example. Deep in my ketogenic journey, I was also doing CrossFit and I was doing triathlon. And fortunately, my testosterone did not fall off a cliff to the point that I had to get on HRT. But there was a significant decrease in libido. There was my sleep started suffering and my recovery started suffering. I started waking up at like 2 or 3 a.m. and just like, why can I not sleep right now? I should be so tired from all the workouts I did yesterday and all the work I accomplished. So that was like a huge red flag to me that something was very wrong. I should be dog tired and sleeping through the night. Why am I getting up at 3 wide awake? Cortisol dysfunction. Okay, and that came from too much activity, too much exercise, and very low carbohydrate dieting. All right, so I'll leave that there. I could do a whole show just on that topic alone of cortisol and sex hormones and low carb diets. But know this, that it's sex hormones. If that's the topic we're on, a very high sugar, high carbohydrate diet is also not good for your hormones. Okay, neither is the opposite end of the extreme, a very low, no carbohydrate diet. That's not good either. So here we go. We're finding balance somewhere in the middle. And that balance is what gives us optimal hormones, optimal health, optimal micronutrient status. Let's just be reasonable and logical here, folks. So number 3, it's a social buzzkill. Let me tell you about this. Going out to eat, I hated being that guy that was like, yeah, I just want a ribeye and broccoli. And everybody at the table, like, you're the guy that, like, oh boy, this guy doesn't eat a carb. He hasn't had a carb in 7 years. I actually had someone say that to me. And it's socially awkward. It also doesn't allow us to really connect with individuals through food. And I think that is important for our social connection and our family connection. It also doesn't allow you any room at all for alcohol consumption. And not to say that that's a healthy thing, but it does help us connect socially. And moderate, low consumption of alcohol has actually been shown to have health benefits. Okay, so especially cardiovascularly and for the heart. So that's a whole nother topic, but my point is this. It's a social buzzkill. and it really limits you to be able to go out to eat with friends, and it also limits your connection with them to share in foods together. And that's why like tapas joints are so fun, because we get all these plates and we all get to sample different things, and that's why the social connection through food is important. And I was losing that personally doing a ketogenic diet years ago, and I feel like I'm in a much better place, more balanced. And I have my weight, I'm leaner than I was then, or as lean, and my weight has not suffered for it, and I'm such a low, like less stressed out person, and I have more social connection than I did before. So I think that's important to talk about. Number 4, feeling depleted after a hard day. Even more so, if you think about it, like after a hard day, we're all tired, right? Especially if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and above. I mean, yeah, like after a hard day, you're tired. But what people will notice is not doing enough carbohydrates is they're even more depleted and tired than they would be if they had just the right amount of carbohydrates. And this is primarily due because muscle tissue stores glycogen. Glycogen is the storage form of carbohydrate, and the muscle primarily fuels itself off of creatine, number 1. Number 2 is glycogen, okay? Its fat utilization is so low that we don't even need to include it in the conversation, because muscle glycogen is the main fuel source. We literally store carbohydrate in our muscle tissue. So you can't tell me that we should be no carb or low carb or whatever if you're trying to use and activate your muscle tissue all the time. It seems to reason that if God made us to have muscle glycogen stored in our muscles, that we should, focus on adequately filling those storage units if we're actively depleting the muscles through exercise or activity or work, whatever. So, and then lastly, low carb often leads to worse sleep quality. This goes back to the cortisol conversation, and that's because melatonin and cortisol are completely inverse. That is our circadian rhythm. Is cortisol rises in the morning, gets us out of bed, melatonin goes low. As the day goes on, you see a decrease in cortisol all the way down to that 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock hour. What's rising at the same time that cortisol is lowering is melatonin. That is our circadian rhythm. High cortisol, low melatonin, high melatonin, low cortisol. That's rising and falling us throughout a 24-hour period. And this allows us to get up and moving and get lots done. And then it allows us to rest and recover and regenerate at night. And remember, we talked about lower carb or no carb will lead to higher cortisol levels. Well, that will lead to lower melatonin levels. And so then you get off balance. And this is why I was sitting there at 2 or 3 a.m. twiddling my thumbs, wondering why I could not sleep. So all of these reasons, and we haven't even touched on, like for female health, women crave carbohydrates before their menstrual cycle. One of the reasons why is because carbohydrates help to produce mucosal production, and mucosal production helps women facilitate shedding the uterine lining and having a period. So, we could touch on a broad range of topics on why carbohydrates are important. But to recap, the main reason why I think they are for both men and women is our micronutrients come from a lot of colorful fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, all these things, right? Carbohydrates suppress cortisol. And especially if you're active or you exercise or you're an athlete, you can have extremely exacerbated cortisol levels and dysfunctional circadian rhythm if you are doing too few carbohydrates and not balancing that out. Number 3, it's a social buzzkill. It leads to more stress because you're walking into a restaurant, and while everybody else is thinking, oh my gosh, what do I get to enjoy? You're the person that's like, well, I can only have like this, this, and this. Well, what am I going to eat? And am I going to get enough of protein and enough fat? And is it going to be too many carbs? Is it going to put me over my 25 carb limit for the day? And it leads to more stress, and you don't connect socially with the people that you're sitting down to eat with. So I think you know what I'm talking about. I'll leave that one and put it to bed. But Lastly, you're feeling depleted because you don't have enough muscle glycogen. And then, of course, we talked about the worst sleep quality, worst sleep duration. And that also applies to carbohydrates. High carb, high sugar will also lead to poor sleep quality and poor sleep duration. So, again, we're talking about this balance here because we know that high carb, high sugar is not good either, but we know that low carb, no carb is not good either in the long term. It can be great for 2 or 3 weeks. If you really want to do a reset, I'm all for the carnivore diet or a keto diet for 2, 3 weeks at a time. Or if you're severely type 2 diabetic, insulin resistant, I think that a keto diet in and out, or like a keto diet Monday through Friday type thing, can be super beneficial depending on your circumstances, and everyone's different. And so even if you're like a huge keto advocate and it's changed your life, don't throw me out here on the chopping block just because I'm kind of leaning more towards medium to low carbohydrate and the right kind of carbs, which we're going to talk about in a second. But everyone's different, and so everyone's got to figure out where their carbohydrate tolerance is. But we know that carbohydrates are not the enemy. It's sugar that's the enemy. Added sugar from sodas, from white carbohydrates, high starch carbohydrates, that is the enemy. That is what's making us obese. That's what's making us diabetic. And that's what we have to severely limit to only small occurrences. So what carbs do we want to include? Well, colorful carbs, not white carbs. So colorful carbs, sweet potato. I've been doing in the last year or so yuca and plantains, berries, salads, root vegetables, nuts, seeds, more fruits, especially like non-tropical fruits like apples and pears and things like that on my more active days. And then I also like a limited amount of white rice, quinoa, oats, things like that. Also on my more active days, I'll throw some of that stuff in there because remember, the more active we are, the more we can replenish our muscle glycogen. The less active we are, probably the less carbohydrates we actually need. So if you're looking for like a gram basis, I recommend about starting at like 100 grams of carbohydrate a day, and then maybe a more active day is more like 2 to 225, 250, especially if you're like a big male, right? And you're super active. But even when I go train at the gym and I do my workout with the guys, and then I go do construction all afternoon, I probably still only have 150 grams of carbohydrate all day. Okay, so I'm still considered a low carb person compared to the standard American public, which, by the way, eats about 300 to 400 grams of carbohydrate a day. And that's because a lot of people drink their carbohydrates. So the Starbucks Frappuccino, the energy drink, the soda, that kind of stuff can quickly add to 100 to 150 extra carbohydrates on top of their burgers and fries, pizza, that kind of stuff. So you can quickly see how somebody could have 400 grams of carbohydrate in a day. And that's what's really driving blood sugar through the roof. And speaking of blood sugar, that'd probably be my bonus tip. And I have a whole show on this if you want to go back and listen to it. But it's strictly on how testing your blood glucose can tell you such an awesome story on how you're processing sugar and how close you are to being type 2 diabetic. And also it can be a good gauge of whether you're trending towards losing body fat or not. So in other words, waking up fasted, testing your blood glucose. If that number is under 90, I see people drop body fat like crazy. If it's above 90, if it's above 100, we've got work to do. And I've also oftentimes seen people who think they're doing all the right things until they got their blood glucose below 90, fasted first thing in the morning. They were stuck and they only lost so much weight until they plateaued out. And then lo and behold, they text me and they're like, Zach, I got it to 83. And I'm like, okay, we're doing good. Keep it there. They keep it there for weeks on end. And guess what happens? They started dropping body fat like crazy. So that's my bonus tip is if you don't know where your blood glucose is at, get a simple $20 blood glucose monitor from Walgreens and start testing that first thing out of bed in the morning while you're fasted and see where you're at. That can be such a good gauge. I'm 25 minutes in, so I'm going to take this in for a landing and tell you guys thank you for listening to the show. If you have any questions on the material we covered in today's weekly coaching session, simply email me at Muscles and Veggies or DM me on Instagram. The links for all the ways to find me are in the show notes below. Please review this show on whatever podcast player you're listening to. That also helps the show out and helps people find this podcast. And then please review me on Google as well. The link is in the description to leave me a Google review. That helps people find my personal training in Northwest Arkansas. Listen, I'll see you guys next week with a whole new topic. If you have something you want me to cover, DM me, email me, ask me a question. I'll cover it on the show. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good day.